VRN, where educators share what works.
I think that all goes back to teaching our students to question the tools that they're being asked to use or that they will use later in life without us there.
Good morning, everybody. How are you all?
Good morning. Good, thanks.
I was actually looking forward to us getting together today. We've spoken quite a bit amongst ourselves, and I think education in general, about assessing the products, the artifacts that students make using AI. We've got ideas around guidelines and policies, and making sure that what students are creating has some element of their own thinking, their own creativity as part of it. Okay, so fine, box checked. I've also been hearing more and more conversations around education, which I personally agree with, that, like it or not, good or bad, generative AI and AI more general is here to stay. And we'll be doing our students a disservice if we don't encourage and guide and train our students in using AI effectively. Because if they graduate all of their schooling and they're still not comfortable with these tools, they might be, well, they're likely be, at an employment disadvantage because AI is being integrated into the workforce. I think that argument is really solid, so box checked. And if that's what we're doing, it brings up a new wrinkle, a new challenge. We have to somehow have a way to track and assess the student experience with AI on top of the product that they're generating. We want to be able to make sure that students are using AI in an appropriate way, and we want to be able to, again, to assess that. So how do we do that?
I think there are a few frameworks in educational technology, but what I'm noticing is not everybody knows about these frameworks. More people know about SAMR, but may not know about research frameworks like TPACK or even EEE from Liz Karen Kolb. I think, though, that the frameworks might need to be adjusted a little bit or amended a little bit to add AI, but I can see where the frameworks would help with what teachers need to know so that they can effectively integrate technology, but so that they can also assess it. So, for example, EEE talks about how you can enhance, engage, and extend student learning, but it does give you a one-page rubric that kind of asks questions about the technology, whether it's AI or anything, that you're using, and is it actually the right tool for what you want to use and what you want your students to learn. So I think maybe people can start with frameworks like that, but then I wonder if maybe the frameworks need to be adapted a little bit.
And just before we hear from Dan and Caroline, SAMR is kind of like an evolution of EdTech integration, right? So I think I forget the R, but you check my work, Julie. It's substitute, augment, modify, and is it revolutionize?
Oh, could be, because honestly, I forgot too.
Right. And I think that's the evolution of integration, right? If you're going to bring a new technology into the classroom, the first thing that it often does is substitute the use of the older tech, and then it can augment that. Then it modifies, it brings new abilities into the classroom, and then revolutionizes. It changes everything, and iPads in the classroom kind of followed that model. All right, so I like it. That gives us...
redefinition. I had to look at it.
Okay, redefine.
I think these frameworks are really interesting. When I've been playing around with ChatGPT mostly, but other AI, I tried out these frameworks. TPACK, SAMR, there's another one I'm trying to remember the name of. I'll have to look it up. And I was really fascinated with the vocabulary that's used in these frameworks. So, Julie, you've just given the EEE example, which is enhance, engage, extend. Now, these are all positive, progressive words, which up till now, I think as we've integrated technology into teaching and learning, they have enabled us to, like you say, substitute would be the lowest level. So, for example, the whiteboard, blackboard, or a smart board if it's just used in a basic way. And then technology really has enabled us to enhance, engage, and extend. But one thing I'm seeing with generative AI is that it can also go the other way. It can take away from foundational learning and erode that. none of these frameworks, I've actually written about this, none of these frameworks take into consideration it could go backwards in a way.
That's so interesting.
Learning. So yeah, they definitely need to be amended and adjusted. I haven't worked out how yet, but there's certainly a need.
So I want to run with that just a little bit, because I received some excellent professional development around iPads in the classroom over a decade ago. And one of the things that was raised as a concern, and that the facilitator certainly elaborated on, was the idea that some instructors could use an iPad or a similar technology to substitute themselves. Like basically, the joke was grab a cup of coffee, put your feet up on the desk, and let the iPad teach the students. So am I wrong, Caroline, that the potential has always been there for new technologies to go backwards? We just never really, maybe the risk wasn't as great as it is right now, or we never fully articulated it?
Sorry, I know you said Caroline, but it's actually funny that you said that. In the EEE framework, in her book, I think it's either Learning First, Technology Second. That's how Dr. Kolb came up with the EEE framework, because she was walking through a classroom assessing, and students were using iPads. And so it was like to really ask the students what they were doing, and the students expressed how they were gaming to get to the next thing. They really didn't know what it was that the teacher wanted, but they knew how to get to the next level so they could just be finished. And that sparked her thinking too of, wait a minute, what are we doing?
Right.
I totally agree with what you said, Tom. I think there's always been that situation there. It's just really exacerbated now. Just having a think about what Julie's saying about the EEE framework, I would like to turn it into a quadruple E framework now. I think erode needs to be added onto the beginning so that we can also see there's backwards as well as forwards.
Love it. Dan, you've been sipping on that coffee for a while?
I have. I'm just enjoying the conversation, but I may be off base on this, but I mean, I'm looking at whether or not to introduce a new tool to the classroom, looking at how our students would use that tool. There's two different things that we need to look at. We have to analyze the tool ourselves and figure out, is this going to be what's best for my students? So, I mean, analyzing the complexity of the tool. Is this age appropriate for my students? Is this, does the tool present any biases? What's, the learning curve that's going on with this? Is it truly an innovation, or is this just new and fancy?
Shiny new whittle, right?
Right. And is there legitimate relevance to adding the tool to my classroom? So I think we have to look at all of that first, even before the tool passes the door of our classroom. Then when we're looking at, student use of that tool, are they solving problems? Is there a way for them to collaborate with that tool? Are there ethical issues that I need to be mindful of? How is the tool actually fostering critical thinking, or is it removing that? And how easily are students able to integrate this tool with the curriculum that's being used in the classroom? So we have to, evaluate the tool, but then evaluate student use of that tool.
And I think that all goes back to teaching our students, yes, us as teachers, to be that first line of defense for exactly what you said, Dan, but then also teaching our students to question the tools that they're being asked to use or that they will use later in life without us there.
At what age do we do that? How young is too young?
You could start as early as kindergarten. I mean, with simple things about not sharing passwords. There's just all different ways of introducing things at a lower level. We don't often think that, but as an early childhood elementary educator, I can attest that, you can start introducing basics in kindergarten and then continue to spiral up to the next level of understanding of digital citizenship.
And it's interesting that you bring up, just the basics of don't share your password. But yet, as much as I think we as adults say, yes, don't share your password, that is a really bad thing. Clearly, we don't think so, which is why Netflix had to put in a policy about sharing passwords. how do we combat that? When students see, oh, we're using Uncle Johnny's Netflix account, but yet you're telling me not to share my password. I don't understand.
Well, I think it's also the idea, though, of don't put anything out there, air quotes, right? Don't put anything into the cloud or into the internet that you don't want seen or coming back at you 5, 10, 20 years from now. And that gets easier to frame the older you get, right? I'm not sure a young person even can conceptualize the idea that this might be funny right now, but harmful to me 15 years from now.
And that goes to too, right? When your parents are the ones who are putting you out there, and then maybe years later you don't particularly care for that. But there are ways. There's definitely curriculum, Common Sense Media, ISTE, where you can start. But again, it's just like math. It's a spiral of learning where each year you're adding on, hopefully.
Well, that's part of the problem, but my head's actually spinning now. So correct me if I'm wrong, please, and then maybe I figured this out myself. But at the very beginning, I kind of glossed over the students need to use these tools to be prepared for the world of tomorrow. Box checked, we all agree. Am I hearing hints that we don't all agree? That maybe I'm not the only skeptic in the room, and maybe we're adopting generative AI too quickly? But then let me propose an answer to my own question. Are we making a mistake by constantly saying generative AI and treating it as this yes or no thing? Are we at the point now where there are so many tools, School AI, Magic AI, ChatGPT, Bard, that we shouldn't really be talking about AI so generally anymore? Some tools are acceptable and some tools we should have caution. So help me out, bring me some clarity on what we're talking about here.
Tom, one of the things I can jump in with in regards to like school AI, this is a tool that I am now going to be employing more and more in my classroom. And I'm using it for a few different reasons. One, it's different than ChatGPT. With school AI, I as a teacher, I get to see everything, the entire conversation that each of my students have with the bot that I have built. So I get a copy of all of their conversations in real time. That's fantastic. Then I also get insights into how students are using the AI. A lot of times students have mastered the skill of looking like they're doing what they're supposed to be doing without doing anything. They know how to look busy and inquisitive. And so when I look around the room and I can see everybody's working and working really well, now I get a little prompt that says, this student is off task. So it's really hard for a student to fool the AI that they're doing the work when they're not. And so now I am better prepared in like, oh, I know I need to engage this student right now because they're off task. And so getting that information in real time is fantastic. And plus, this particular tool isn't providing them with all of the answers.
So depending on the tool, is that where you land? We do need to start parsing out our considerations by individual tool?
I would say yes, because there are certain tools that, one, they're FERPA and COPPA compliant, so we know that data is being used appropriately or protected appropriately. And there are tools that are gates wide open. There is no protection for the student. We have no control over how they're interacting with that particular AI. So I do think we're at a point where we definitely need to be more selective in what we're having our students engage with.
Do you show your students behind the scenes what you can see that they're doing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What's interesting is this conversation went in a completely different direction than I intended. I thought what we would talk about was the strategies, the nuts and bolts assessment of student using AI. Dan, you kind of skirted around that with what school AI allows you to see, but what I'm hearing from you all right now and today is most critically, teachers need a framework going into the adoption of generative AI tools. what do I want my students to be doing with this tool? What do I want my students to be able to do? What do I want them to create? And what experience do I want them to have? And to have either the triple or, Caroline, quadruple E model or SAMR model, just have an alignment framework in mind for integrating the technology. Then we have to be extremely deliberate about the tool that we're choosing, because tools offer different strengths. And then we have to be diplomatic and have reasonable expectations about what kind of infrastructure support our schools and our districts might be able to provide us. And when we checked all of those boxes, we're ready to deliberately integrate an AI tool into our classroom. And at that point, we need to be able to assess our students' interaction with it. I got all that straight? That sound reasonable?
That sounds absolutely 100 to me.
Tom, I do want to ask Caroline, because I think a lot of our discussion is around American concerns. Caroline, what do you see on more of a global perspective regarding technology integration in a classroom? I mean, are these global concerns, or are these just more isolated to the U.S.?
These are totally global concerns. We may have different accreditation bodies and different rules and regulations, but they are totally global concerns.
All right, so everyone, another very rich conversation. I really appreciate it. I don't know what your calendars look like, but you all willing to meet up again here sooner than we usually do and keep this conversation going with AI?
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right, well, I'll ping you all then on the group chat, and we'll set up another one. Until then, have a great week in the classroom, and see you very, very soon.
Thank you. See
Take
you
care.
soon. Bye-bye.
You can see links to all the tools mentioned in this episode in the show notes. Thanks for listening.